and welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. I am Reverend Grenetta Mason, aka Reverend G. And I'm here every Monday night on WEMS Radio Live at 8 p.m., bringing you conversations with guests from all walks of life and with all different perspectives. We talk about life, we talk about love, and we talk about spirituality. We talk about spirituality from a practical point of view. How does it support you in your everyday life? What spiritual practices support you when you need clarity or when you're feeling down? And I always talk about the spiritual toolkit. And the spiritual toolkit is very personal to you because it's the practices that are your go to practices. So, my guests, we talk about what our practices are that support us. And now, during this time, there's just so much uncertainty and so many things going on. It's great when we can have some go to practices to support us through what I say the chaos all around me sometimes. And because one of the things that I really would love to do is support you in finding joy and living your best life with grace and ease. And so the spiritual practices and the spiritual toolkit can be a way that you can find that joy. So you can follow me every day on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason and on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. Tonight, I'm excited because I have a very special guest that I've known for a long time, the Reverend Dr. Alvin O'Neal Jackson. He is currently the co-chair and the executive director of the Mass Poor Peoples and Workers. I crack up laughing at this because I thought I had practiced this perfectly, but I'm gonna let him tell you what it is. I know it's the Mass Poor People and Low Wage Workers Assembly. I got it right. Hold on, I got it. And the March on Washington. So I'm going to have him come in and we're going to just go ahead and talk about that after I couldn't even get the words out. Reverend Jackson, happy to have you here. Right?
Thank you, Reverend G. It's good to be with you tonight.
Yeah, that
That's a
was a
mouthful.
mouthful. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And I
It is.
swear I have practiced over and over and over
Well,
again.
I stumble on it sometimes myself, and we've been trying to kind of figure out ways to shorten it. And we said, well, we're not going to just go with an easy, simple slogan. We're going to just put the whole thing out there. So we go with it.
So I think that would be a great place to start. So I've known you for a long time from
Yes,
Reverend Jackson a long time ago, right? Now.
yes,
And
yes.
so we'll get to talking about how you transitioned from being a pastor, senior pastor, to where you are now. But talk about what this the assembly is and what's going on with that.
Yes. So it is the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls.
Mm.
And it's June 18, 2022, this year. And so we're saying that it is a transformative, generationally disruptive event in Washington. We're calling, they are in this country, I should say this, there are 140 million poor and low wealth people in this country. Over
Mm.
half, nearly half of this country's population lives beneath the poverty line. People sometimes working 2 and 3 jobs, struggling, trying to make ends meet.
Mhm.
And so we're calling attention to that. So we're calling poor people and their moral allies to join us in Washington, D.C. on June 18th, and where we expect literally hundreds of thousands of people to fill the streets of Washington, calling attention to the plight of poor, low wage workers in this country.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's great and that's interesting because I was telling people come on down, and then I'm saying, okay, so the agenda you described as the reason we're coming down is to be disruptive and to bring attention to the whole problem. And so talk to us about what the agenda is. And I know that when I looked at the assembly, I saw like 10 different things that you guys are promoting and would like to do. And one of the things that come to mind for me is we all want to make a difference in some way. So
Yes.
it feels like here's an opportunity that if we can share it in a way where each of us can maybe find us a space or find somewhere that we can make a difference. Again, the march, that's great. But if tomorrow I wanted to start making a difference, talk about that.
Yes. So if I could just take a moment. So we believe that there are 5 interlocking evils, injustices facing our country and really the world.
Okay.
Number 1 is systemic racism.
Okay.
Number 2 is, and systemic racism is not just somebody calling you out of your name, using the N word, but it's systems that are in place, that racist systems that are in place. The other is systemic poverty. We believe that too often in this country, we blame the poor. And I mean, people are struggling. People are not poor because they're there by choice. So we believe that there are systems in place that keep people in these poverty conditions. So systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, our climate is being destroyed. There are folks who want to deny climate, that something is going on with the climate, but that's real. The war-based economy, we spend more money on the military in this country. I mean, it's insane the kind of money we spend on the military in this country. And just with the reappropriation of just a few of those dollars, we could take care of everybody in this country so that nobody is in poverty. And then the 5th is what we call the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. There is in this country, people believe that if you could just wrap yourself in the flag, you're for guns, for the Second Amendment, and you are against abortion, and then that you are on the side of God. But we believe that it's about more than that, and that is a false moral narrative. So those 5 interlocking evils and injustices we're always speaking to and always calling attention to. Our focus is on getting the federal government and state governments to change policies that address these injustices and evils. There are some things that we could do around. We could do charity. We could provide housing for people. Or churches and groups do that, and that's all wonderful and good. But we believe that our work is addressing the systemic issues and getting governments, state governments, and the national government to change their national policy that addresses these 5 interlocking evils and injustices. And so that's why we're calling poor people, their moral allies, politicians, artists, influencers, all kinds of folks are going to join us in DC on the 18th as we call attention to this, and that we call people to the polls to vote. So we're going to be signing up people to vote because all of these, if enough folks really vote, we could really change the direction of the country just with our active voting here. So that's what this is about.
I know I did see that there was a local one in New York City. And so that is interesting that that you're going for government, trying to change policies, which I know can sometimes be difficult because we look at how these policies have been in place so long. Some are there just hidden under other things that we don't know about. So
That's right.
it really takes a lot to change policies. So I understand on the local level too, where if we could get the state, like the New York chapter, how many different places are you guys located where
We're
you?
organized in 45 states. So we have
Wow.
45 coordinating committees across the
Mhm,
country.
mhm,
We have 200 national partners who are with us,
mhm,
denominations,
mhm,
community groups, schools, colleges, universities, unions.
mhm,
So some 200 national organizations are with us, and we're in those 45 states across the country. And before June 18th, we're starting a national tour, and we're calling it "We Can Do More." MORE. We
mhm,
can do more.
mhm,
The M in that M in more is mobilize. The O is organize. The
mhm,
R is register, and
mhm,
the E is educate, empower, and engage. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to start in Birmingham, Alabama with an online event. Next
mhm,
Monday, we'll be in Birmingham with an online event. Then we're going to go to Texas. We're going to Austin, Texas
mhm,
in the end of February. We're going to Ohio. We're coming to New York in April,
mhm.
and we're going to California in May. And the last stop on the trip is going to be in Memphis, Tennessee, place you know,
Right.
the last Monday of May, and that will be the last stop before we head to Washington D.C. on June
Exactly.
18th.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
entering it. It sounds like a huge agenda, right?
yeah,
And
yeah, 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 yeah.
how did you transition from being the senior pastor to this? What was that? The,
Well, it's very interesting. 43 years I pastored churches, and my first major congregation was the congregation in Memphis where you grew up,
mhm,
there, and Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church in Memphis. So I was there almost 20 years there. That congregation grew from a couple of hundred folks to over 8,000 during those years that I was there. And then a church in Washington, D.C. Called, it was largely a white congregation.
mhm,
And I accepted the call to go to that congregation. Reverend Jesse Jackson said to me when he heard that I was going, he said, "Man, I don't understand how anybody could leave unconditional love and go
mhm,
somewhere and stand on trial, because it really was unconditional love in
mhm,
Memphis.
mhm,
And it was a hard place in Washington, D.C. But I said it was a call from God. I felt God calling me to go and try to build this multicultural congregation there in D.C. So I was there for 10 years. And then I went to New York, and I was there for 10 years,
mhm,
also trying to build a multicultural congregation. So
mhm,
when I was kind of getting, Reverend G, close to around that 70, that big 70, I
mhm,
kind of thought it was kind of time to kind of slow it down a bit,
mhm,
and just kind of smell the roses a little bit. And so my wife and I relocated to Florida, and we were down here for a few months. And then Bishop William Barber, who heads the Poor People's Campaign, called me early one morning, really about 3 o'clock in the morning, called me and
mhm,
said, "Man, I need you to come over here and help us with, pull this Poor People's Campaign together."
mhm,
And I kind of heard that early morning call as a call from God. Uh,
mhm,
God was speaking to me. So I kind of gave up the slow, easy life of walking on the beach and showing up early for the early bird senior citizens discount at the local diner, and signed up for the Poor People's Campaign. And so
mhm.
that was 2.5 years ago. And so
Wow.
I am working harder. I'm working harder
Mhm,
now doing
mhm,
this
mhm,
than I have worked, than maybe I've worked in a long time. But
mhm,
I've got a lot of joy doing it, working
mhm,
with a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds and across the
mhm,
country, working with a lot of poor and low wealth folks who are struggling. I'm really, it's just really opened up a whole new world. Most of my work, as you know, was inside the walls of the church. And
mhm,
now this work is outside the walls. And I think that's really where the real work is.
mhm,
It's outside. It's
mhm,
outside. And so,
out there with the people, right? And it's interesting when you talk about being outside and being able to support people in however you could support them, right? And it came to mind that as your experience in being a pastor and a minister and a supporter, right, of people, like I think about people who are, they come to you if they're sad or if they need support as a counselor, I would say, right? And being able to shift from being the pastor and having that inside church to now it seems like this is like a huge big world, right?
It's a whole big world, and it's everybody. It's everybody. And I think in some ways that's really what, if you would, I mean, we call it in the Christian world the kingdom of God. I think that's really what it is. It's much bigger than our denominations and labels. It's Christian, it's Jewish, it's Muslim, it's people of faith, and it's even people of no faith. It's people of no faith. And so it's our being able. When I was in New York, I coined a phrase, and I called it the divinity of difference. That we often look at difference, people who are different skin color, different race, different economic background, different cultural background, and we see differences as deficits. That if you are different, you somehow have a deficit. But God sees differences. There is divinity in difference, because God created us all, and God just kind of, and looked at this beautiful creation, and God said it is good. So with all of our differences, so they're not deficiencies or deficits in our differences. There is divinity in our differences. And really doing this work with the Poor People's Campaign has really given me the opportunity to really kind of embrace that in a really full way.
And it's interesting too, because I've studied all the different religions, and then when you put it in the terms of like poor people of all religions, and they are low wage workers, it doesn't matter whether you are Christian or Jewish, we can all come together to support each other from the perspective of money, healthcare, all the areas where we find the disparities. When talk about the connection between, I saw something where you talk about Martin Luther King, Poor People's March, and today, how you guys connect those two together.
Yes. Well, in 1968, Dr. King was making preparations for a major march on Washington, the Poor People's Campaign. He was the one who coined that term, the Poor People's Campaign. And he said that, Dr. King talked about three great evils, the evil of poverty, militarism, and racism. And so he was bringing together all of these groups, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, bringing together all of these groups, and they were planning to come to Washington, D.C. and set up a tent city in Washington. And they were going to just stay there in Washington until the government changed its policies and addressed the issues of poverty, racism, and the war-based economy. That was what Dr. King was planning. And in the midst of making those plans, the sanitation workers called him to Memphis, and he went to Memphis to walk with the sanitation workers and to be with them in the struggle. And so many of his lieutenants tried to persuade him not to go to Memphis, that Memphis wasn't a place for him to go. But he insisted on going to Memphis. And you know the story of what happened in Memphis. He went there, and lost his life in Memphis. And then there were those who came along, Dr. Abernathy and Andrew Young and others came along and tried to take up the work of the Poor People's Campaign, but it fizzled after a few years. And so this work with Bishop William Barber and the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo-Harris, who's from New York, by the way, at Union Seminary there in New York, they are the co-chairs of the Poor People's Campaign. And so about 4 years ago, they took up this mantle of the Poor People's Campaign. And so the interruption that happened in 1968, we're picking that up and trying to finish the work that Dr. King started in the late 60s.
Yeah, for me, it sounds like a huge agenda when I think about policy change, but you start and you just keep pushing forward.
You keep pushing forward.
Yeah,
because really what this is about, I mean, it's countercultural. It's revolutionary. We're trying to change the political narrative, because the narrative is that we don't have enough. I mean, the Congress, for instance, has spent all of these months trying to pass the Build Back Better bill. And what we're getting from some folks is, well, we don't have enough money. We don't have enough money to do. We can't provide health care for everybody. We can't provide education. We can't provide child care and paid family leave. We don't have enough money to do that. Well, listen, in this, I mean, we just passed the Congress, just as they said that, they passed a $750 billion defense bill that was just for 1 year. And there were a handful of billionaires in this country who made $2 trillion during the pandemic. Just in the last few years, a handful of folks, less than 10, made $2 trillion with a T. And to say we don't have enough, so we've got to change the narrative. We're saying that there is not scarcity, there is abundance, but there is a scarcity of will to do the right thing. That's where the scarcity is. We don't have the moral will. And so we are bringing the pressure on, keeping the heat on, those in power, those in government, those in positions to make decisions that, you know, I mean, you hearing from the people out here. We're coming in peace. We're coming in love. We're not coming. This is not an insurrection. This is not going to burn down anything or tear down anything, but we're going to keep coming until there's change. We like to say we're not the insurrection, but this is the resurrection. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So this is what we're doing, and it's not easy work. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen quickly, but we've got to stay with it. And we've seen some changes along the way, and we believe that if we just stay with it, so we say that our deadline. People say, "Well, how long are you going to do it?" Our deadline is victory. We're going to stay with this until we get victory. Yeah.
You know, I also think about, as we're talking, how can people get involved right now? I know you're talking about the march. How can people get involved? I know I do, like at my school, they look at me as always trying to get all the students to register to vote. I know we have that part going on, but what are some of the other things that we could do like now that you guys have said we could go get involved in to help, to support? Because I think we're all looking for some point. Why are we here? What is our purpose? How can we make a difference on the planet? What kind of things can we do? And so I'm looking at this as a possibility for people to join in to make a difference now.
Well, I think for starters, I mean, we could just, as I said, we are organized in 45 states. And so there is a Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee in almost every state in the union. So folks could just kind of look up, you know, their state and put in Poor People's Campaign, and information will come up about the work of the campaign in your area. If not in your
Okay.
state, there's one close by, because they are working with state legislatures and school boards, and working around local issues in the community. So you could get involved in a poor people's campaign close to you. And of course, everybody every adult can register to vote and encourage others to do the same. Because what we're saying, this is the mass poor people's, low wage workers assembly and moral march to Washington and to the polls. So we are going, it's June 18th, but we're saying that June 18th is not just a day, but a declaration of an ongoing, committed moral movement to build power, to change the political narrative, and pass policies that are fully address poverty and low wealth from the bottom up. So everybody can get involved. I mean, get involved locally, get involved in voting, and then help us to build the numbers on June 18th, because we think it would really be a powerful thing. The March on Washington in 1963, there were a couple of 100,000 people there. We're not announcing our goal, but we're saying that it's hundreds of thousands of people that we're expecting to be in Washington on June 18th.
That's really good, and I'll keep encouraging people to show up. So one of the things I wanted to shift a little bit, one of the things that I think about, and it's interesting to me, is when we're talking about spirituality, and I wanted to shift a bit and I want to talk about your experience as COVID has been introduced into the whole equation, right? What have been some of your experiences with supporting people, and even now? I just had the 1 year anniversary of my sister's death, right? And so, like, it's all about coping and what support we need, right? So, talk a little bit about your experience with the whole COVID-19.
Well, it's been a very, very challenging time. It's been challenging for all of us, and you said, with your sister's death. And I've lost family members who've from COVID, and friends, and just kind of walking with people through that, and just the time of again, I'm always I've been a busy person, always on the go, so you have to kind of limit not going as much, and so just kind of really. This has really been a time for me personally to just kind of slow it up a bit, and to do some reflecting, and developing some simple rituals. I mean, I'm a morning person, so it's given me an opportunity to pick up some spiritual practices that I maybe have neglected a bit before this, but those practices of just kind of being quiet, and some extended period of reading and prayer and reflection and centering. So it's been. I mean, you have to. We've had a couple of friends we have lost, people we've known who have dealt with depression. And so it's really been a very challenging time, but it's also been a time to kind of go back and reclaim some of those spiritual practices that I've kind of I've laid aside a little bit. So so there's been blessing in the midst of this.
Right. Yeah. I always say to people too,
yeah.
we can think about it, think about it from all the pain, the hurt, but then what can we be grateful for from this time? And to be able to shift, like you said, there were some blessings, and to be able to shift and
yeah,
look at what we can be grateful for, because it caused us all to sit back and step
right.
back. Because I was always on the go too. I was
Yeah,
gone,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then it really causes us to just step back
yeah,
and be quiet. So it's
yeah,
been 2 years of like being really quiet
yeah,
and
yeah.
centering,
That's right.
and
That's right.
doing what we have to do. I know you have mentioned depression,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I always want to talk about and have people talk about is this whole mental health issue
Hmm.
and depression. And for me, this week, I've been thinking about somehow saying like being capable or able to talk to people who are depressed. If
Yeah.
somebody is like really in a deep depression, how do you talk to them, and how do you even know people?
Yeah.
Because people really hide it and then they
Yeah.
don't seek the help. And it was just so devastating when the young,
Yes. 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 In New York. Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yes.
so it's just been like, and then I think about also this has been so much tragedy over the past 2 years. How many people are really hiding somewhere depressed, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
not really able to seek the help that they need. So I
Yes.
always like to talk about like seeking the help,
Yes.
finding people, a community, or somewhere where you can get the support that you need, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
We talk about when I talk about spiritual practices, that's I talk about it from that perspective. How can they support? You could say go to a therapist, but after you leave there, what is it that you have as an individual that
Yeah.
you can go to? What practices work for you? So, talk about your practice. You say you've gone back to some of them. I like to like share them and give people insights into how they have supported you.
Well, one of my practices is really interesting. I mean, it's just is walking,
Mm.
long walks, and I am very privileged to live here in Jacksonville, and we're near the water. So I go in the mornings to the beach, and I walk 2 3 miles. I mean, I used to do a mile or so, but I've increased my distance, and I often would go with my earbuds in with music or listening to a podcast or something.
Mhm.
And I've just started this practice of going and just not putting anything up, just to be silent, just
Mm.
walking inside. And really, I mean, that has been, I mean, I can say that I'm praying, or I'm just, I mean, but I'm just open, and it's amazing. I mean, it's really a refreshing kind of, to do that for about an hour, and I'm out, when the sun comes up.
Mhm,
I'm
mhm,
out walking,
mhm,
and that's, I mean, that's been a real challenge for me, because I am, I mean, I read a lot, but just go and not read anything or not listen to anything,
mhm,
but just to go and just walk, and to practice mindfulness and practice
mm,
being in God's presence
mhm,
is a powerful, powerful piece, and has
mhm,
just given me all kinds of dividends doing
mhm,
that. So that's a huge one.
mhm,
Another one is, and I was thinking about that in terms, depression. I think I have spent, and I will claim this as a spiritual practice, um, uh, c- calling up people and just being in conversation with friends,
mhm,
sometimes on Zoom, sometimes just a telephone call, but just really being very intentional about reaching out to friends and family and people I know. And just, I'm not trying to get them to sign up for the Poor People's Campaign or
mhm,
join the
mhm,
church or do this, but I'm
mhm,
just as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
To just as a friend, and
Mm-hmm.
to not be afraid to go some places with them in the conversation to talk about some things, because I think one of the things that with depression, you're right, we hide it, people hide it, and but friends, and sometimes we think we're kind of doing a friend a favor for not bringing up maybe a subject that's uncomfortable. But I'm remembering something the mother of that young woman in New York said. At first, she said, her daughter was fine. She was a high achiever and all of that. But then a few days later, she said, but there was something. She was a high achiever, but there was something. But there was always some depression around it. She used the D word there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think, the people that we know, it might not be spoken, and it might be kind of undercover, but we sort of know there are signs,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't. So I think we have to. I mean, being in real relationship with
Mm-hmm.
folks, that's a powerful piece. And so I think I've done a little bit. I'm not doing as well as I should, but I've done better with that during COVID.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just being in relationship with some of my friends and family and folks I know, and really seeing that even as one of my spiritual practices.
Mm-hmm. Those are really good and different from the ones that I've heard. And yeah, it is true because I'm the one thing that I take from that whole thing too is how to be in conversation with people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because I think I also think about it's a lot about listening because
yeah,
sometimes you
yeah,
want to give some solutions or
yeah,
maybe try
yeah,
this or
yeah,
maybe do
yeah,
that, but
yeah,
the
yeah.
practice is just to listen,
Just to
right?
listen.
Just to listen, right?
Just to
And
listen. Mhm.
encourage them. And I love that too because like when we say oh people should see a therapist, you could also have a really great community, a really group of friends that you talk to, or a good friend that you can talk to that
Mhm.
can support you to get you to a place where maybe you might not need a therapist, right?
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
but because you're able to talk to somebody. But I'm
Mhm.
learning a lot more about it. What I was saying to myself today is I don't really know a lot, so I'm interested in learning more about how to have conversations, right? That make
Yeah, yeah,
sense. Right.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what it
yeah.
is. Really be in a place to have conversations because one of my things that is really important to me is about thinking, right? Your thoughts produce everything. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I feel that so I might say, so what thoughts were you thinking that caused you to be there? Or could you just change your thoughts and then shift the way you are? And not
Mhm.
I could do
Mhm.
that a lot of times, but that's not so easy for everybody to do. So,
Yeah, yeah.
that's not what people want to hear all the time when you're
Right,
trying
right,
to be in
right.
when you're coming in your space of depression, you can't always hear that. So
That's right.
that's what
That's
I'm
right.
learning too, and try to think through is what are the right conversations that can support people to take
Right.
the next best step for them.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's good. And sometimes, you're right. It's sometimes it's just listening, and sometimes even deeper than that. Sometimes it's just being present.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
mean, the greatest gift we can give another person is the gift of presence. And I have found as a pastor, even going into tough situations with people who have faced loss and facing difficult situations, sometimes the best I can do is to not go and read a scripture or say a prayer or
mhm,
give them some words of wisdom.
mhm,
Sometimes the best thing I can do is just go and be with them, be
mhm,
present with them. Hug people and just be present. And just, the old folks used to say, say we're going down the road. We're gonna go sit with the folks.
Yeah,
just go sit with them. That's what that is. Just being present. That's a gift. There's a lot of power in it. And maybe we don't give that enough, because when you give that, I mean, you open up, there's an opening in that for people to maybe share in some ways that they wouldn't share if you're so busy filling it up with a lot of words and stuff,
right?
You crowd all of that out. But if you can just be present, you might provide an opening for something.
Yeah, I like that. The listening and being present is really. Something just came to my mind that I've been curious about. And I think I lost this from before. I was always interested in youth and spirituality and religion, right? And I was reading this book recently, a recent Christian book of talking about how the Christian youth are leaving the church, right? Do you have any perspective on that? And for me, I think that being in the church, that foundation was really great, because we got the foundation and then we venture off somewhere and we go do something else, but we have that, and then we come back and then we fill it in with things. So that whole youth thing, what perspective do you have on that? And what do you see happening today?
Well, I think we're probably not, church leadership is often not being intentional enough in reaching youth, and we're not being malleable enough to kind of, because you can't just, times have changed, and you've got to, we can present the gospel, we can present the message of faith to young people, and they're really hungry for it, but you've got to sometimes put it in their language and their idiom, and so I think sometimes our rigidity, our being so rigid about it, we lose them, and we're not being intentional enough. And things have just gotten so complicated, and there's so many forces pulling at young people, and we've got to, and so we've got so much we're competing with, competing for their attention, and when you and I were coming along, we didn't have a whole lot of choices.
Right.
There were certain things we were going to do.
Right.
We didn't have a whole lot of choice.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's on. On leadership of faith groups in that. And but I remain hopeful. As I see these young people in the Poor People's Campaign, there's a lot going on outside of the walls of institutional church, institutional religion. And there's a lot going on out there, and I really think that those are the inside. I think we can learn some things from the outside. So I'm hopeful. I'm more hopeful than I am pessimistic about it, about our future.
Right, because I think that as I have been talking to different people, everybody is now spiritual. Right?
Yeah. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual.
I'm not, not religious, but I'm spiritual. And there's that whole distinction, I guess, between religion and spirituality. And I just see a new movement towards most people. You feel that people are mostly saying they're spiritual now? Because everybody, I think I've kind of interviewed, are more spiritual and not church going anymore. However, I see that I would say opening up more to than just staying stuck in the whole Christian. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but all of the people that I know that are Christians are now seemingly more open to other religions and more
Yeah, yeah.
open that there is something outside of Christianity. What has been your experience with that? Because it was like, if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, you're going to hell, and the only religion is Christianity. And if you don't study the Bible, all of that. Are you seeing a shift, or is Christianity just still so rigid?
I think I think many people in leadership in Christianity are very rigid, but there is a shift going on,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a shift going on. That whole business of that divinity in difference. I mean God. I
Mm-hmm.
mean that. So I don't. There are less people going to church, and church attendance is down. But I think that's an opportunity for the church, and so I'm just not pessimistic about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think God is very much at work, and so I'm hopeful more than I'm pessimistic about where we're headed here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm a lot more
But
hopeful.
as we could say, we're headed somewhere, right? There is a
We're headed
change going
somewhere.
on,
We're headed
right?
somewhere. We're headed
Right.
somewhere.
And,
That's right.
and,
We're
and
headed somewhere.
hopeful that, yeah, that we're headed in a direction that'll support all of us, right?
Yes,
And what
yes,
comes
yes,
to
yes,
mind for me is in the chaos in the world, right?
yes.
All that's going on out there, how do I keep my sanity
That's
within
right. That's right.
all of that's going on,
That's right. That's
And
right.
so that's why I personally, I do my meditation every day. I listen to gospel music. I have
Yes,
practices that keep me sane, right?
yes, yes,
Because
yes,
I could get caught up in the chaos just as well, right?
yes, yes, yes,
And a part of doing the show is to let people know we all can get caught up in it, but there's something that can support you throughout, right? What
yes.
practice? I talk about consistency in some practice. And
Hmm.
even the shift that you did was really great with the walking with the music now to the walking without it was
Yes, yes.
a shift
That's
in
right.
supporting us, I think, because we're all looking to find that peace and
Yes,
find that place of
yes,
comfort
yes,
in all this chaos, right?
yes, 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 yes,
You
yes,
know?
yes.
And
Someone, yes, yes.
right.
Someone has said that we're not human. We are, what is it? We are spiritual beings having a human
Human
experience.
experience,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
But we are basically spiritual beings.
Mhm.
We are spiritual beings, and we do a lot of things for the flesh, for the human part, but we don't really. So we got those spiritual practices. It's important that we all have those that really nurture the essence of who we are, because
Mhm.
that's who we are. We are basically spiritual beings,
Mhm.
and we've
Mhm.
got to have those practices that address the
That being.
spirit in us. Yes, that
Mhm.
being in us.
Mhm.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So it's really, really good. We have some more time. What would you like to leave the people with? I always think of you having these great messages, right? So I'm putting you on the spot, I guess, right? Right. With um
Well, I don't think I really have a. Um, I don't really think I have a. One of the. It's kind of in line with what we've been talking about, and I'm for this whole business of spiritual practice and and we're talking about depression. You know, there's a scene in the Gospel of John. It's after the resurrection, and Jesus appears to the disciples after the resurrection, and he comes into this room, and they don't believe that it's Jesus, and Thomas is there, and Thomas and Jesus reveals himself to Thomas, and Thomas said, you know, I'm not, and Jesus shows him the wounds in his hands. It shows him the wounds, and when he sees the wounds in his hands, that is when Thomas said, you know, I believe. It wasn't until he saw the wounds. And I think that, you know, one of the things that I have discovered as a pastor over the years, sometimes you can say great words and put a nice message together and all of that, but the power is in your being fully disclosing, even showing your wounds. That's when the connection happens. When you can really be vulnerable enough to even show your wounds. And we are all really, Henry Nouwen was a great theologian and writer, and he wrote a book called The Wounded Healer. In a very real sense, we are all wounded healers. You know, and the power of our sharing with others is our being willing to show our wounds, and to be, hey, you know, I'm really not that much different from you. I'm going through the same stuff you dealing with.
Exactly.
I'm struggling just like you. I'm in this. So, I mean, there's power in that. And you know, I think it's the way we reach young people. I think, you know, one of the reasons we've lost out, you know, we want to go and talk down to them, and preach down to them, but it's even as adults going and sharing with them. I mean, we're struggling. We got stuff going on just like, so, you know, I mean, that's a powerful way to connect. So one of the things that has been powerful for me working with the Poor People's Campaign, I've really come to see that this is not something that I'm stepping down and doing for people down below me, but really, you know, I am poor. I'm one of you. I'm with you in this. We're in this, and it's all of us working together, doing this work. So it's not, you know, this
hierarchy thing.
Right. That doesn't work. That doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's how you connect with people. And connecting with people is clearly really important, right? In doing the work and getting people to even get involved. It's about that connection that you have with them. It's today is the 10th anniversary of my mother's death.
Oh, today is the 10th anniversary.
Is the 10th anniversary, right?
I loved your mother.
I know you did, right? That's
mother.
how I know. I felt like so close to you, like you were family, because of the relationship you had with my mother.
Your mother was a sweetheart. She was a dear heart. The thing that I loved about her, I mean, she didn't laugh and smile at everybody and every joke and everything. But if she was with you, she was really with you. And she and I developed a relationship, and she loved me and my family. And she used to just sometimes, just out of the blue, she would do chicken and chickling and dumplings, and sweet potatoes. And I tell you, there was nothing like those chicken and dumplings that Sister Geraldine Briggs and those sweet potatoes. I love. It was nothing like it in the world.
Yep, exactly. And I was like, it was today, and it was because our connections was so through her. Because, like
Yeah.
you said, I wasn't really there. And I was like, wow, this morning, I was like, wow, it's the 10th anniversary, right?
Wow, wow,
Yeah,
wow. The 10th
the
anniversary.
whole thing. So
Today is the 10th anniversary.
today is the 10th
Wow, wow,
anniversary,
wow.
February 7th, right?
February the
And,
7th.
so it's like remembering and then even managing the feelings around that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I talk about too sometimes how not having like the bypass, not saying
yeah,
like, oh, everything is okay, and not really feeling the sadness or having the emotion, just kind of like skipping over it,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and so today was an interesting day. It just flowed along, but at a moment I was like, oh, right, having to
Well,
acknowledge, right?
Well, you just reminded me of something, and I just saw one of our family members just post something. LaShawn just
Mhm.
posted something. Yes, she did. In the chat, I saw that just posted there.
Yeah.
LaShawn in Memphis just posted that. But
Mhm.
you know what? You reminded me of the 10th anniversary of your mother's death. And today, and I had not thought of it before now,
Mhm.
today, February the 7th,
Mhm.
is the 100th anniversary of my father's birth. My
Wow.
father would have been 100 years old today.
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 Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yep,
Wow.
yep, 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 yep.
100.
So,
Yeah.
so this was special being with you on
Yeah.
February the
February.
7th, the
Yeah.
10th anniversary of your mother, the 100th anniversary of my dad.
Mhm.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah.
Wow,
So,
wow. What a
yeah, I'm glad that you were able to join me, and I know
thank
like the
you.
family, LaShawn's watching, family's watching, right? Really, really
I
cool.
remember LaShawn in Memphis when we first came to Memphis.
Mhm.
LaShawn was a majorette at Hamilton High School. She was out there leading that band.
Needed it.
Majorette. Great.
Ah, yeah, Robert's like great individuals.
One of
Yeah,
the
so
things.
I am so happy that you were able to join me, and I
Thank
am
you.
going to come to that march. I was telling Doretha we got to look to find us a place to stay early before all the people emerge, right?
Yes, yes, yes. You gotta
So
come and you gotta bring some folks. You gotta help us
yeah.
sign up, mobilize some people to come.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
gonna look into it because, as I was saying, we're always looking for how we can make a difference. We're
yeah,
always
yeah,
looking, and then during the time when they were marching on the streets, I wasn't protesting and doing all the marching, but there are other ways to make a difference, and that's the
that's right.
idea. I feel like you guys have so many agendas that there are so many different ways that we can support and make a difference.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
that's what I will be looking to promote and telling everybody how we can support this project and be a contribution.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Reverend
Yes.
G.
Thank you
Reverend,
too. I
this
know
has been wonderful.
yeah,
Blessings.
I'll be in touch. Thanks for joining me.
All right. Thank
All right.
you. Thank
All
you
right.
for
Take
having
care.
me tonight.
All
Thank
right.
you. Blessings. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for joining me tonight on Conversations with Reverend G. And you can find me here every Monday at 8 p.m. live on WEMS Radio. You can also find me on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason and on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. Make it a great day, and I will see you next Monday. And remember to live your best life in joy with grace and ease.